1987 Cadillac Alante. This comes with the hardtop.
Welcome to Vintage Vehicle X-Ray. The most complicated car Detroit ever built begins with a machine that seemed to belong to two worlds at once. On one side, it was a Cadillac, meant to defend American luxury pride against Mercedes-Benz and Jaguar. On the other, it was shaped and bodied in Italy by Pininfarina, then sent across the Atlantic to finish its life in Detroit. That alone would be unusual. But the Cadillac Alante was not merely unusual. It was expensive, ambitious, beautifully dressed, and burdened by one of the strangest production stories any American luxury car ever carried. If you want to understand why people still remember it, you have to begin there. This was not a simple car built in a complicated age. It was a complicated car built through a complicated process, and the complexity became part of its identity almost from the moment it appeared. It was also the sort of car that made people stop and ask questions. They noticed the doors, the stainless body, and the unmistakable feeling that this machine had been created through effort far beyond normal luxury car production. That is what made the Alante important. Cadillac introduced it for the 1987 model year as a high-style front-wheel drive luxury roadster meant to challenge European prestige convertibles. General Motors had already spent years trying to modernize Cadillac's image, but the Alante was different. This car was supposed to send a message. It would show that Cadillac could still think boldly, still spend heavily, and still create something glamorous enough to stand beside the best foreign names. The project carried enormous ambition because it was not only about one convertible, it was about Cadillac's position in the luxury world. A successful Alante could have made the brand look worldly, modern, and technically adventurous in a single stroke. People are everywhere in this story. Pininfarina's designers and craftsmen in Italy gave the car its elegant skin. General Motors executives in America believed that imported sophistication and Cadillac luxury could be joined into one impressive answer. Assembly workers in Turin and Detroit handled separate parts of a process that had to be timed with unusual precision. Dealers sold the dream to buyers who wanted style without giving up the Cadillac name. Owners stepped into a car that felt more cosmopolitan than many American convertibles, yet still expected the support and confidence of a domestic luxury division. Mechanics later learned that behind the polished image sat a machine whose unusual birth and technical choices would always make it a little different from the ordinary Cadillac they already knew. The shape helped the Alante make its case. Pininfarina gave it clean, composed lines, a long hood, a neat rear deck, and a profile that looked calmer and more mature than many flashy open cars of the period. It did not try to look like a cartoonish sports car. It looked like a serious European grand tourer wearing an American badge. The nose was tidy, the glass smooth, and the body sat low enough to suggest purpose without trying too hard. Even today, the Alante's design still feels restrained in a good way. It has that quiet 80s confidence that came from careful surfaces rather than exaggerated drama. The more you look at it, the more you understand why Cadillac thought this shape might help restore some continental glamour to the brand. The manufacturing story is where the title becomes fully deserved. The Alante's body was designed and assembled by Pininfarina in Italy, but final assembly took place in Detroit. To make that possible, Cadillac and Pininfarina relied on specially modified Boeing 747 cargo aircraft to carry finished bodies from Turin to the United States. Haggerty notes that the bodies were flown from Italy to Detroit aboard these modified aircraft, a process so unusual that the story alone has become part of the car's legend. This arrangement was later nicknamed the Alante Air Bridge, and it remains one of the strangest production solutions any Detroit luxury car ever used. On paper, it gave the car Italian craftsmanship and American final assembly. In practice, it also made the whole project expensive, slow, and vulnerable. That philosophy tells you a great deal about late 1980s Cadillac. General Motors was willing to spend money and tolerate logistical absurdity in order to create a halo car that looked globally sophisticated. The company did not merely want another comfortable convertible, it wanted a statement. That statement was that Cadillac could borrow Italian style, surround it with American luxury equipment, and still sell the result as a serious alternative to the imported elite. The problem was that complexity does not automatically create greatness. Sometimes it creates delay, cost, and a car that has to work impossibly hard just to justify the way it is built. The Alante carried that burden from the beginning. It was never allowed to be merely good. It had to be worth the whole airborne idea. There was also a clear historic moment behind it. When the Alante appeared in the middle of the 1980s, American prestige brands were feeling pressure from increasingly respected European and Japanese rivals. Mercedes-Benz still held enormous authority in the luxury convertible world, and Jaguar's image remained powerful as well. Cadillac could not answer those cars with tradition alone. It needed something more international, more elegant, and more visibly ambitious. The Alante was meant to be that answer. Haggerty later described it as a car once envisioned as the new spirit of Cadillac, and that phrase captures the scale of the hope perfectly. This was not a side exercise. It was presented as a symbol of renewal. In everyday use, the Alante could actually be a pleasant companion. It was a front-wheel drive luxury roadster, which gave it a different character from rear-wheel drive European rivals. That layout made the car feel more relaxed and secure in ordinary driving than its styling might suggest. It was never a raw sports machine. It was a comfortable, distinctive cruiser built for boulevards, highway travel, resort parking lots, and owners who wanted to make an impression without shouting. The car came with a removable aluminum hardtop and a cloth folding top, so buyers could enjoy open-air motoring without fully surrendering practicality. That mattered because the Alante was not designed to win races. It was designed to fit into wealthy daily life with elegance. Inside, the car followed the same two-world logic as the rest of the project. The cabin was trimmed to feel upscale and international rather than purely American in the old soft sofa sense. Leather, wood, electronic features, and Cadillac comfort equipment were all there, but the atmosphere felt more tailored than bloated. Haggerty notes that the Alante offered technology Cadillac saw as state-of-the-art, including four-wheel anti-lock disc brakes, advanced suspension thinking, and a Bose stereo. Buyers could also find details that made the car feel unusually modern for its moment, from digital instrumentation in some years to optional built-in cellular telephone equipment. This was a cockpit meant to suggest progress, not nostalgia, and it succeeded often enough to be memorable. The specifications tell the same story of ambition. The Alante rode on a wheelbase of just under 100 inches and used front-wheel drive, a choice that instantly separated it from many European luxury convertibles. Early cars were powered by Cadillac's 4.1-liter aluminum V8, while later cars moved to the 4.5 and then the 4.6-liter North Star V8. Haggerty notes that the final 1993 model received the North Star engine with 295 horsepower and 290 pound-feet of torque, the sort of output enthusiasts had long wished the car would receive. That improvement matters because it shows Cadillac kept developing the idea. The company never stopped believing the Alante could become the car it had promised at the start. Comparison makes the Alante easier to judge fairly. Against a Mercedes-Benz SL, the Cadillac looked more unusual in concept, but less resolved in reputation. Against a Jaguar XJS convertible, it could feel more modern in some features, but less romantic in its overall image. Against other Cadillacs of the period, though, the Alante was startlingly different. It was lower, slimmer, more international, and much less dependent on old American luxury cues. That is why it still fascinates people. It never sat comfortably in only one category. It was not fully European. It was not comfortably traditional Cadillac. It was a Detroit attempt to become worldly through engineering, logistics, and style, rather than through simple brand inheritance. The engine story needs only one short explanation here. Early Alantes had enough V8 power for smooth luxury cruising, but many reviewers and owners felt the car deserved more urgency than it delivered. The final North Star-powered version changed that feeling significantly. With nearly 300 horsepower, the 1993 Alante finally had the sort of mechanical authority people had always expected from such an elaborate machine. In a way, that made the story more bittersweet. Cadillac gave the car the engine it should have had earlier, but by then the end was already near. Why then is the Alante remembered as the most complicated car Detroit ever built? Because almost every part of the project seemed to involve one extra layer of effort. Italian design, Italian body construction, air transport across the Atlantic, American final assembly, luxury technology meant to prove sophistication, constant development to keep the car credible. This was Detroit trying to solve a prestige problem with engineering theater and international choreography. It was brave, costly, and slightly mad. Haggerty notes that nearly 1/4 of all Alantes were built in the final 1993 model year, when the car was at its strongest mechanically, but even that could not undo the years of expense and the limited sales. Complexity had become both the car's magic and its burden. That is one reason the Alante lasted in memory, even though it did not last in production. Cadillac built around 21,500 of them across the whole run, enough to prove the car was real, but not enough to make it ordinary. The Alante occupies a very particular emotional space in American car history. It is admired, questioned, respected, and sometimes smiled at all at once. Owners often defend it not because it was perfect, but because it was so earnestly ambitious. The car tried something big. It dared to solve luxury through a combination nobody else was using. Even people who think the project was too expensive or too awkward often admit that modern car making does not permit many ideas like this anymore. Here is one fact worth remembering. The final 1993 Alante was not only the most refined version. Haggerty notes that it was also the largest single-year production run in the car's history, accounting for almost 1/4 of all Alantes built. That means the car became most desirable just as its story was ending. Few automotive details feel more bittersweet than that. And perhaps that is the best way to understand the Cadillac Alante. It was complicated because Cadillac wanted it to stand for more than one thing at once. It had to carry Detroit ambition, Italian style, international prestige, new technology, and a promise that American luxury could still surprise the world. That was a lot to ask of one car. Older viewers understand how moving that can be. Some machines are loved because they are simple and durable. Others are loved because they reveal how far a company was willing to go in search of something greater. The Alante belongs to that second kind. Here at Vintage Vehicle X-Ray, that is what we love to explore. We look back at vintage machines to understand how they were built, how they worked, and why they still live in memory. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your love of vintage cars. And thank you for helping keep these old stories warm, honest, and alive.